Nonetheless, we began looking at this laboratory. This is an Inca laboratory where they imported soils from all across North, South, and Central Americas to grow various types of crops, including various varieties of corn, probably more than 100 varieties of corn. But they were observing not just which soils and which environmental conditions were best for the crops, but rather what were the effects of these various foods on their population. And it occurred to me that this whole concept, that what they were doing was they were modifying the genetic expression. The foods that we eat are information. They're speaking to our genes. We are modifying genetic expression in every mouthful of food that we consume. This concept that the genes are one way, that your genes are there to determine who and what you will be and locked in a glass case, really is something that I was taught in medical school, but it's certainly what we now know is not the case. We argue this dichotomy of nature versus nurture and recognize that there's this incredibly beautiful dance between our environment and genes going on in both directions at every moment. It's not nature and it's not nurture. Or as what Greg Braden talked about in the Divine, his new book, it's not the artwork or the artist, but it's both. It's both acting together at one time. Every experience that you have at any moment is affecting your genetic expression. My lecturing to you right now is affecting your genetic expression. That's a powerful thought. Every prayer, every hope, every disappointment, every time you love, it modifies your biochemistry by modifying your genetic expression. It's got very quiet in here all of a sudden. I said the love word. That always makes people go. So here we are in this incredibly huge laboratory of the Incas. And when you finally step back far enough, you recognize it's in the shape of a uterus. So it's honoring motherhood. It's honoring the feminine energy. And I don't think you have to look around this audience to see what percentage of people here are women. And it's time that we looked at this Mars and Venus dichotomy and stop fighting the wars of medicine and start nurturing health with feminine energy. These are the thoughts that came to my mind. And I think that I was more able to grasp these difficult concepts because he insisted that I chew these coca leaves all day long. And I'll tell you what, it was very mind expanding. So we look at amyloid and recognize that we're now able to image amyloid in the human using the Pittsburgh compound, which is incredible. We've just put some amazing technology in our office in Naples, Florida, and you're going to be the first to see it.
What's this, Mum?
An electroencephalograph. It records the electrical activity of the brain, and this way we can tell whether the brain is working properly, and if not, we can get some idea of what's wrong with it.
So we're now able to look at the brain. I wanted to talk about just briefly turmeric and just in terms of its importance in Alzheimer's disease and amyloid chemistry, really become quite front and center. You know, the observation that the incidence of Alzheimer's is quite diminished, is quite reduced in India compared to non-curry consuming countries like the United States. And basically what we see is that curry is, here's some of the experimental animals looking at it. Curry is, the animal that was studied was an animal that was genetically modified to become an Alzheimer's rat. I mean, and what they look at are hippocampal carbonyls. This is a measurement in the hippocampus of the experimental animal of free radical oxidatively damaged proteins. And in this transgenic mouse, they are dramatically increased. And the effect of curcumin on this production of hippocampal carbonyls is dramatically reduced. So there's plenty of experimental information there that tells us that we should be giving this ancient knowledge a modern look. And basically, looking at the production of amyloid in the experimental animal when exposed to curcumin is really very profound, because amyloid protein is not produced as readily. In view of its efficacy and apparent low toxicity, the spice shows promise for the prevention of Alzheimer's disease. We don't talk about that much. I was on Fox News doing an interview about Alzheimer's and during the first Bush, during that campaign, and the interviewer said to me, well, it's true that it's just genetics. Obviously, nothing you can do can prevent it. And I had the IFB in my ear so I could hear the questions, and somehow or another the wires were crossed, and what I was getting was George Bush's campaign speech in my ear, and he's telling me about Alzheimer's, and it was just a moment. It had to be there. Anyway, both curcumin and DHA can reverse cognitive deficits. I'm going to move on to some genetics here very briefly. We all talk about the apolipoproteins and the genes that are involved, the ApoE alleles. Basically, you'd like to have 2 and 3, you don't want 4. If you carry 4, it codes for less effective neuronal repair and less effective antioxidant coverage in your brain, which is really important. So, if you have the APO4 allele, your risk for Alzheimer's goes up 500%. So you don't want to have it, but if you do have it, are you destined to have Alzheimer's disease? Well, no. In this study appearing in the journal Gerontology, they looked at the relationship between beta-carotene and ApoE4, basically showing that if you had high serum beta-carotene but still were stuck with this genetic predisposition but not determination, you had an 89% risk reduction in cognitive decline if you carried the ApoE4 allele. Now, who's at risk for Alzheimer's? Not a rhetorical question. Here's what we'll do. I want everybody to put your stuff down, and I want you to take your right leg and make a clockwise rotation of your right leg. Okay, everybody's doing that? Now, I want you to draw the number 6 in the air with your right hand. Now, if your leg reversed, then you have troubles multitasking. You may need to think about some things. Oxidative stress is very important. We've heard this time and time again. Take a breather. I need some water. The new understanding is, again, that these diseases are caused by oxidative damage. It's an early event in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease and can serve as a therapeutic target. Oxidative stress can serve as a therapeutic target to slow the progression or perhaps the onset of the disease. This comes from the American Medical Association in the Archives of Neurology. What are they saying? That better antioxidants and agents used in combination to upregulate defense mechanisms might have a role to play. When we look at T-bars or measurements of fat damage in the Alzheimer's brain dramatically increase, you would say, well, let's look at the vitamin profile of antioxidants, and you can see that, yes, Alzheimer's patients have lower levels of antioxidants. Well, let's look retrospectively at those individuals who took vitamin C and E retrospectively, and their risk of Alzheimer's is reduced by 78%. Now that should stop you in your tracks, because nobody's heard of the article. It was published by a very obscure organization called the American Medical Association that said that the risk of Alzheimer's is dramatically reduced. But this is what we're told to do. We're told to treat Alzheimer's disease by giving this drug, and it's a fantastic drug. Works wonderfully. And here's a review of every peer-reviewed research study on the cholinesterase inhibiting drug appearing in the prestigious British Medical Journal. And here is the reason that we prescribe Aricept. This is a review of all published clinical data on cholinesterase inhibitor, and here's what they tell us. Flawed methods, small clinical benefits, scientific basis for the recommendation of cholinesterase inhibitors in treatment of Alzheimer's is questionable. And the take-home message for doctors is these recommendations for the use of these drugs are not evidence-based. The benefits on various scales are minimal. Methodological quality of the available trials is poor. But yet, we've got to believe this information, because look at this ad. We should believe advertisements because they always give us good information. But even the experts are wondering why we're giving this drug to Alzheimer's patients. And here you can see that might explain it. It's a multi-billion-dollar experience. U.S. News and World Report tells us the new face of Alzheimer's and what you can do to push for a cure. We're going to challenge that. Again, keep this in mind. We've got to be a little preventative here in the neurologic diseases. Ignored Henderson, it's unscientific. Let's hold me to the scientific criteria of evidence-based medicine in our discussions today.